The Celtic Twilight by Yeats. We continue with Enchanted Woods. And before I enter into this video, there are inherently sacred places. Places that become sacred because those of the unseen world, and I don't mean the spiritual side of the human beings, I mean other beings, some of them decide that certain places are sacred to them. But through the practice and the attention of a place, places become sacred, such as this place is sanctified to certain rituals and certain times and principles. Last summer, whenever I had finished my day's work, I used to go wandering in certain roomy woods, and there I would often meet an old countryman and talk to him about his work and about the woods, and once or twice a friend with me, to whom he would open his heart more readily than to me. He had spent all his life lopping away the wych elm, and the hazel, and the privet, and the hornbeam from the paths, and had thought much about the natural and supernatural creatures of the wood. He had heard the hedgehog, Grain Ug, he calls him, grunting like a Christian, and is certain that he steals apples by rolling about under an apple tree until there is an apple sticking to every quill. He is certain, too, that the cats, of whom there are many in the woods, have a language of their own, some kind of old Irish. Well, animals have their own language, obviously. He says cats were serpents, and they were made into cats at the time of some great change in the world. That is why they are hard to kill, and why it is dangerous to meddle with them. If you annoy a cat, it might claw or bite you in a way that would put poison in you, and that you would be the serpent's tooth. Well, getting infections from being clawed at by some animal is extremely common. Less common than it used to be, but sometimes he thinks they change into wildcats, and then a nail grows on the end of their tails. But these wildcats are not the same as the marten cats who have been always in the woods. The foxes were once tame, as the cats are now, but they ran away and became wild. He talks of all the wild creatures except squirrels, whom he hates with what seems an affectionate interest, though at times his eyes twinkle with pleasure as he remembers how he made hedgehogs unroll themselves when he was a boy by putting a wisp of burning straw under them. That's not nice. I am not certain that he distinguishes between the natural and supernatural very clearly. He told me the other day that foxes and cats, above all, to be in the forths and lisses after nightfall, and he will certainly pass from some story about a fox to a story about a spirit, with less change of voice than when he is going to speak about a marten cat, a rare beast nowadays. Many years ago he used to work in the garden, and once they put him to sleep in a garden house, where there was a loft full of apples, and all night he could hear people rattling plates and knives. Hear people rattling plates and knives and forks over his head in the loft. Once, at any rate, he had seen an unearthly sight in the woods. He said, "One time I was out cutting timber over Enchanted, and about 8 o'clock one morning, when I got there I saw a girl picking nuts with her hair hanging down over her shoulders, brown hair, and she had a good clean face, and she was tall and nothing on her head, and her dress was no way gaudy, but simple. And when she felt me coming, she gathered herself up and was gone as if the earth had swallowed her up, and I followed her and looked for her, but I never could see her again. From that day to this, never again. And he used the word clean as we would use words like fresh or comely. Others, too, have seen spirits in the enchanted woods. A laborer told us of what a friend of his had seen in a village of had seen in a part of the woods that is called Shanwalla. From some old village that was before the wood. He said, one evening I parted from Lawrence Mangan in the yard, and he went away through the path in Shanwalla and bid me good night. And 2 hours after, there he was back again in the yard and bade me light a candle that was in the stable. And he told me that when he got into Shanwalla, a little fellow, about as high as his knee, but having a head as big as a man's body, came besides him, and led him out of the path and round about, and at last it brought him to the lime kiln, and then it vanished and left him. Ah, the days when a neighbor could trust a neighbor with their spiritual tales, but that's, what the question section of my channel is about, is sharing experiences and finding out about other other people's experiences. Oops. That's not good. A woman told me of a sight that she and others had seen by a certain deep pool in the river. She said, I came over the still from the chapel, and others along with me, and a great blast of wind came, and 2 trees were bent and broken and fell into the river, and the splash of water out of it went up to the skies, and those that were with me saw many figures, but myself I only saw one, sitting there by the bank where the trees fall. Dark clothes he had on, and he was headless. A man told me that one day, when he was a boy, he and another boy went to catch a horse in a certain field full of boulders and bushes of hazel and creeping juniper and rock roses, that is where the lakeside is, for a little clear of the woods. He said to the boy that was with him, I bet a button that if I fling a pebble on to that bush, it will stay on it. Meaning that the bush was so matted that the pebble would not be able to go through it. So he took up a pebble of cow dung, and as soon as it hit the bush, there came out of it the most beautiful music that ever was heard. Then ran away. They ran away, and when he had gone about 200 yards, they looked back and saw a woman dressed in white, walking round and round the bush. First it had the form of a woman, then of a man, and it was going round the bush. A changeling is someone changed by the jinn, but the jinn are certainly, because they're not bound by our physical terms, certainly have more ability to change, even in terms of our own psychology, but there could be a series of beings that we see manifest at once too. But, I guess the jinn was summoned by throwing poop, but you don't want to throw poop, that's ew. And you don't want to gamble, even if you think it's a sure thing, it's like, okay, there's a slight chance that you lose. It's like, well, you never want to lose, and you can lose. And in that sort of case, you can lose really, really big. And but anyways, I often entangle myself in arguments more complicated than even those paths of Enchi as to what is the true nature of apparitions. But at other times I say as Socrates said when they told him a learned opinion about a nymph of the Elysas. The common opinion is enough for me. I believe, when I am in the mood, that all nature is full of people whom we cannot see, and that some of these are ugly or grotesque, and some wicked or foolish, but very many beautiful beyond anyone we would ever seen, and that these are not far away when we are walking in pleasant and quiet places. Even when I was a boy, I could never walk in a wood without feeling that at any moment I might find before me somebody or something I had long looked for, without knowing what I looked for. And now I will at times explore every little nook of some poor coppice with almost anxious footsteps, so deep a hold has this imagination upon me. You too meet with a like imagination, doubtless somewhere, wherever your ruling stars will have it, Saturn driving you to the woods, or to the moon. It may be to the edges of the sea. I will not, of a certainty, believe that there is nothing in the sunset, where our forefathers imagined the dead following their shepherd the sun, are nothing but some vague presence, as little moving as nothing. If beauty is not a gateway out of the net we were taken in at our birth, it will not long be beauty, and will find it better to sit at home by the fire, and fatten a lazy body, or to run hither and thither in some foolish sport, than to look at the finest show, the light that the shadow made among the green leaves. I say to myself, when I am well out of that thicket of argument, that they are surely there, the spiritual people. But only we, who have neither simplicity nor wisdom, have denied them, and the simple of all times, and the wise men of ancient times, have seen them and never spoken to them. They live out their passionate lives, not for off, as I think, and we shall be among them when we die. If we but keep our natures simple and passionate, may it not even be that death shall unite us to all romances, and that some day we shall fight dragons among blue hills, or come to that whereof all romance is but, as the old men thought in the earthly paradise, where they were in good spirits. And this is not in the first edition, this is the 1902 part. Foreshadowing mingled with the images of man's misdeeds in greater days than these. And there's a verse in Isaiah, the don't remember what the verse is exactly, but there's a verse that says something like, and there's a creature like humans, but is of fire and is wicked. But not all the jinn are wicked. That's one of the important things. Not all the fairy are bad. Let's not assume these sorts of things. But don't let positive and negative determine your ideas of good and evil either.